If we increase the talent pool, if we create those role models, if we change the perception of the sport, it's a natural thing that will happen on the back of us having been successful with what we're trying to do with F1 Academy. But I don't hinge our success on just getting that woman to Formula One. I fundamentally believe a woman can do it. Obviously, I've shown physically it's possible, and from a speed and performance perspective, it's possible. But I think F1 Academy has a bigger role to play within the ecosystem. And like we touched upon, it's about disrupting. It's about showing that this sport has got representation of its new, bigger and more female fan base. And for us at F1 Academy, I'm incredibly lucky to get so much support from within F1, from the F1 teams, from the F1 management. And we're able to disrupt. We brought Charlotte Tilbury and we painted a car with hot lips. We managed to reach a whole new young audience, and that's what I think is also key.
And welcome to a very special episode of the Fast and the Curious podcast. If you're a regular around here, then you know the drill. Welcome back. But if you're new to the pod, then hello. We hope that you'll stick around. Now, every race week, we dissect and preview the Grand Prix, and we also talk about some of the biggest names in Formula One to try and understand and lift the lid on this mad, mad sport. We also don't take ourselves too seriously. I'm Betty Glover. Christian Hugill is also here. Hello, Christian.
Speak for yourself. I'm an extremely serious broadcaster. Thank you very much. Serious sports journalist. There's nothing unserious has ever passed my lips on this podcast, and nor shall it.
Nor shall it. I beg to disagree. But anyway, joining us today, this is actually a very serious episode. This is a big episode, Christian. Joining us today, we've got former racing driver, the last female driver to get behind the wheel of a Formula One car during a Grand Prix weekend, and now the managing director of Formula One Academy, the junior women's racing series that has the hope of one day getting another woman into a Formula One car. She is also about to publish her autobiography called Driven, which is available in all bookshops from the 23rd of October. Susie Wolff is coming on the podcast. Christian, this is massive.
Yeah, it's huge. I'm really excited because I've spoken to Susie once before, but it was fairly brief. It was a long time ago as well. It was a few years ago. I'm sort of fascinated by her. I think she's amazing. I think there is a bit of a risk I might fangirl her at some point because I just think she's so brilliant. So I'm very excited because I think a bit like someone like Bruce McLaren. Stay with me on this. Bruce McLaren set up McLaren. He was an amazing racing driver in his own right, but sort of his legacy is McLaren. So he's sort of not necessarily as known or remembered in his case, of course, for his sort of racing. You've got a similar vibe with Susie because she was this amazing racing driver who had this amazing career. But actually nowadays, I think fewer people talk about that because of just what she's achieving and the legacy she's sort of cementing with F1 Academy and the incredible work she's doing with making not just Formula One, but motorsport feel like it is a place for women to be able to be who they are and compete in it. So she's a legend, an overused term, but she's already a legend, isn't she?
She's an absolute legend. And we've been trying to get her on this podcast for such a long time. So let's do it. Let's bring in Susie Wolff. Susie Wolff, welcome to the Fast and the Curious.
Thank you, Betty. Thanks for having me.
We have got so much to get through, and we are so excited to talk to you because we've also had your husband on in the past, and he gave us some very specific breakfast items that he has every morning. So I want to check whether he's still eating them every morning. But we need to talk about you. We need to talk about your book and your career. So let's start with where it all began for you. Where did your love of motorsport start?
Well, I'm on my book tour this week, and that's why you see the tartan wallpaper, because for me it was so important to start it back where it all began, in my hometown of Oban. I'm in Edinburgh today. I went to university here. I was a dropout. I didn't make it to the end. But in writing the book, it was really a chance to look back on so many wonderful memories, and I'm very grateful for the childhood I had, growing up on the west coast of Scotland. My mum met my dad when she bought her first motorbike from his shop in Oban. I had a little motorbike from the age of 2. I was back in Oban and I could see the same area and hills that I used to blast around on. And, my dad raced bikes, so we would spend time at Knockhill. That's where I tried a go-kart for the first time. And at the age of 13, I was taken to watch a Formula 3 race at Donington Park. And that's where the dream became a reality. I said, okay, I want to do this. I want to try and make it to Formula 1 one day. And obviously didn't quite realise then, as a fearless, ambitious little girl, just how tough the journey was going to be. But it's been a great journey.
Susie, this is very exciting for me on a number of occasions. One of my earliest motorsport memories was also at Donington Park. Betty will know I love the opportunity to get an East Midlands of England and the UK reference in. So I went to watch an F1 test at Donington Park, which was years ago, which was very exciting. Also, Susie, before we go any further, I mean, Betty's already started by throwing us off course by mentioning breakfast, which is a very Betty Glover thing to do. I think food's at the top of our priorities at all points on this podcast. But Susie, I'm about to marry a Scotsman from Edinburgh. So we've got so much in common here with our journeys, I think.
Well, congratulations to you. And on the topic of food, just to give you a bit of food envy, we've ordered afternoon tea here in the hotel. So I'm counting down the hours until I get my scone. Because I'm not a breakfast person, unlike my husband. I just have a coffee. I never wake up that hungry, but I'm really counting down the hours and minutes till my afternoon tea and my scone with clotted jam. Clotted cream and jam.
Cream and jam. We've got to ask, what order do you do it in? Do you do cream and then jam, or jam and then cream? It's very important.
Definitely cream and then jam with a nice cup of tea.
Cream and then jam. Oh, I do the same. That's
Yeah,
exactly
so do
me.
I.
Yes, that's exactly me. I completely agree. But I have to disagree with something, Susie. Well, not disagree, but I'm staggered that you aren't a breakfast person. I think it might be the thing Scotland's best at is breakfast. Haggis, tatty scones, square sausage. It's definitely my favourite thing about having a Scottish partner is getting the Scottish breakfast. I think you're missing out on your culture then, your heritage there.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I was having breakfast with my sister-in-law, Toto's sister, this morning, and she said, this Scottish breakfast thing, should I try it? It's like, you definitely need to try it. And I did get a bit of food envy because the Scottish breakfasts are, really good.
I also need to add that I am marrying a Scotsman as well. My fiance is Scottish.
I forgot Alex is
Look at us.
Scottish.
Yeah, I know. He's lost the accent.
This is incredible.
I know. Look at us. We're bonding over Scotland. Susie, let's get back to sort of your career though. I've seen loads of photos of you on, like, when you were younger on a motorbike, going through the Scottish Highlands. You used to jet ski as well, didn't you, when you were younger? That must have been such a crazy childhood, such an active childhood. Did you just love it straight away as soon as you got on sort of a electronic vehicle that was quite scary? Automatically were you just like, yes, this is me, this is perfect?
I've had so many conversations recently with Toto regarding kids and, is it down to nurture or nature? And definitely I'm moving more towards thinking it really is nature, because I was always that little competitive girl. I loved speed, I loved adrenaline, I loved competition. So for me, it was natural to go on a little motorbike and then to start racing karts. And I wasn't the quickest initially, but I loved going out there. I loved pushing myself out of my comfort zone, and I loved the competition element. So I definitely think I was lucky to find that passion so early in life, and then to have an older brother. He was only 18 months older than me. My parents never differentiated between son and daughter, so I didn't ever really realize I was doing something unusual for a girl. And of course, in racing, we're all wearing helmets, so you're not conscious of if it's a boy or a girl. And it was only much later in my career that I realized being a girl kind of set me apart, and it's what everyone talked about more than anything else.
It was something that you've just touched on what I was about to ask you, Susie. I raced karts when I was young for about 5 years. In that 5 years, I raced against 2 women, which staggers me now looking back. Again, it didn't feel like a massive thing at the time, but you think of all those races I did in 5 years and raced against a woman twice, which is insane, and why F1 Academy is so important, which we'll get onto. But I guess you just didn't realise that wasn't a thing. You looked at racing drivers on the telly and thought, I want to do that. And I guess your gender didn't feel important at that point.
It didn't at all. And one of the memories I put in the book, we were at the World Championships in Praga, and I had finished P15. which obviously wasn't on the podium, but I'd made it to the final, and that was the year of Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg, Robert Kubica, so it was a strong year. And I was in my awning after, and I was getting called to the podium ceremony, and we all kind of looked at each other, and I thought, well, I can't be in trouble. It's a podium ceremony. I've made the weight. My car's been scrutineered. So I ran along, and I was promptly pulled up on the stage to receive the award for top female in the world. And I remember suddenly thinking, top female? I mean, how many girls are even in the competition? I didn't remember seeing any, maybe one other girl when I was around the paddock. And it was that moment where I thought, well, I'm not here to be the best female. I'm here to try and win races. And that really cemented for me that I was viewed as differently. But to your point, Christian, there were hardly any girls racing. I was normally one of the only, if not the only one, then one of the only ones. But how happy it makes me now to go to kart tracks with my little son, and I see so many girls, and they're not just racing, they're racing at the front. And I overheard my son a few weekends ago talking about who could make the podium, and a little group of friends were talking, and they said, yeah, Greta, she's super quick this weekend, maybe she's going to win. It's completely normal for him to be racing against a girl, that girl might win the race. And that makes me so happy, because that's progress. We're seeing more girls, and they're racing at the front and showing that it's possible.
It's so good. I think with sport in general, it's starting to change now, where you will have young boys on the street talking about female footballers, and that wouldn't have happened 5-10 years ago. And it's the same with motorsport. We're starting to see that shift, and I guess you're so key in sort of making that shift happen and happen quicker. But it must be so different now to what it was like when you were racing. Do you ever stop there and think about those differences and think about how far it's come?
Oh, I definitely do. And I had a moment where in one of the Formula One Academy races last year, I think it was Miami, I stood at the bottom of the podium, and there was obviously one of the F1 Academy drivers. She had a Formula One race suit on. She was standing on the podium at the Miami Grand Prix. And I thought, my goodness, what an opportunity. I could have only ever have dreamed of that kind of support when I was racing. But it also just made me happy and proud that I'd been part of a team that had made that possible. And I'm a big believer in helping the next generation. They should learn from my mistakes, and they should learn from my experience. But seeing that progress in the sport, and seeing this huge young female fan base. I mean, the sport's gone from being something that's was maybe loved to watch on a Sunday afternoon to now being really culturally relevant, and this new young fan base. I mean, that's what's really driven the foundation of F1 Academy. We're showing that the sport is no longer this male-dominated world that's not welcoming to females. It's completely changed, and I think part of F1 Academy, it's breaking down that preconception. You don't need to be a tomboy to love racing. You can love Hello Kitty and you can love racing cars, because both can live alongside each other.
As a fan of both Hello Kitty and racing cars, I couldn't agree more. Susie, couldn't agree more. And actually, we'll move back to F1 Academy a bit later. But I was in the F1 paddock that weekend. You're talking about Miami last year. There was a qualifying session, I remember. It might have even been the first race, but the hot favourite for last year's title was obviously Dorian Pan, who's still in the sport this year. But I can remember a moment where Abby, thinking back, it was the race where Abby Pulling won the race. And for those who've never been to Miami, the paddock is in the stadium, the Miami Dolphin Stadium, and they were showing the F1 Academy races on the big screens of the stadium. And all of a sudden I noticed that I was talking to somebody from McLaren at the time, and all of a sudden we found ourselves watching the race, and we found ourselves saying, Abby Pulling, she's had an amazing start. And obviously everybody was talking about Dorian, and now Abby was there. And Susie, you're right. It's all of a sudden that realisation that we're stood here talking in the F1 paddock about female racing and about female racing drivers. And even that's a step forward, which it shouldn't be, should it? It's a bit rubbish that was seen as a step forward, but it was. I just sort of thought, this is great. It just feels like part of the weekend. And I'm just going around talking to the fans both that weekend and in Austin in 2023. It was just, it's here. It's normal. That's something people are looking forward to seeing. Like people would say, I'm looking forward to watching F2. That's such a step forward, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. And progress takes time. I don't believe that everyone should love F1 Academy. We have to build that fan base. We have to show that we're entertaining racing, that the drivers are capable, which they are. But the momentum that we've been able to generate in just, it's only really in its third season. It's been incredible to see the impact that it's had and the amount of young girls that have been influenced by seeing F1 Academy.
Earlier, Susie, you said that you want young girls to learn from your mistakes. What mistakes did you make out of interest in your career?
Writing the book forced me to go back to some dark places, and I very much wanted to go deep in the book. It's not just about motorsport, it's not just about my polished life, because it's not polished. There were so many tough moments along the way. And the mistakes, I think early on, I wrapped up my own self-worth in my race results. And I really try and help the young drivers in F1 Academy now to realize that you are not you're not worthy of just where you finished on the grid. But having that self-belief and that confidence is key. And I was very lucky in that I had that self-belief, and I guess realized I needed it because there was a lot of naysayers and doubters out there. But fundamentally, of course, along the journey, you make mistakes, and I had moments where I should have spoken up. I should have been, let's say, more vocal on what wasn't right, but it got me to where I am today, and I just want to make sure that now the environment is better than it was, and I think it is already. We've already made big steps forward, but also looking back, I realized that it was some small opportunities in my career that I grabbed with both hands and turned into bigger opportunities. My DTM contract with Mercedes-Benz, it was a 1-year contract, and I ended up staying 7 seasons. The F1 test was only ever supposed to be 25 laps. And suddenly then I was development driver, a term that Williams created to bring me into the team, and then obviously test driver. So sometimes in life it's just about grabbing those little opportunities when they come your way.
We spoke about your early days of falling in love with motorsport, those trips to Donington Park and the karting tracks up in Scotland. How was rising through the ranks? You've obviously just said where you sort of ended up with DTM, with the F1 test, with the role with Williams. How was rising through the ranks? Because for any racing driver, that brings about so many challenges. Climbing the motorsport ladder is such a tricky thing to do.
It really is, and one of the difficulties with our sport is obviously the financial barrier to entry. And I see now so many young talents that just won't get the opportunity because of the high financial barrier to entry that motorsport has always had and will always have, unfortunately. And it was tough, that uncertainty of knowing whether I would race again the following season if I could raise the budget. And I see how tough it still is. But I do think, if you can get yourself into a position where you can show how quick you are, there are obviously driving academies out there. There's people that can support, that can help you make it. But it's so tough, and it's tough regardless of your gender. Whether you're a boy or a girl, making it to the pinnacle of the sport, but also just making a career out of racing and earning money out of racing, it's definitely challenging.
Looking back at your career, do you have any moments that are really memorable where you look back and go, wow, I was so proud of myself for achieving that? Or is there just anything that stands out to you?
Definitely my first ever DTM race. I had broken my ankle the year previously, lost my F3 seat, so I wasn't really well prepared enough for DTM. But I remember just the first weekend seeing the amount of fans and actually realising how big German touring cars was in Germany at the time. And Norbert Haug came to my car on the grid, and I had so much to remember. The practice starts, which temperature to get the clutch to, what temperature to try and get the tyres to, and it was my first ever race. And he said, look up at the Mercedes-Benz grandstand on your green flag lap. And I kind of nodded my head and said, yes, Norbert, I will, thank you. And he said, have a good race. And I was so concentrated on the outlap with the tyres, with the clutch, thinking, okay, I've got to get the start procedure right for the very first time. And I said, okay, look up at the Mercedes-Benz grandstand. And I looked up, and it was full, and everyone was holding placards in different colours to read out, hello, Susie. And I looked at that, and I was like, oh my goodness. Okay, don't think about that right now. Just focus back on your race. And thankfully the start was good and the race was good. So that was a key moment. And then, of course, my very first time in the F1 car at Silverstone, I remember exiting the pits, and I'd done so much preparation to get ready for that test, and I hit the hanger straight and the speed, and I suddenly thought, I hope I've done my helmet up tight enough, because the G-force was pushing it up. But yeah, driving that Formula One car at Silverstone for Williams was such a highlight.
I wanted to talk to you about that because we're lucky enough to speak to young drivers on the podcast a lot. It's one of my favourite things to do. I love seeing the excitement in their eyes when they've raced in Formula One or driven in Formula One or just experienced the car for the first time, whether it be a shakedown, whether it be a first test. What was that like for you? Because, again, I sort of reluctantly ask the question, to be honest, Susie, because it's a massive moment and it's massive pressure for any driver. But at the time, particularly we're going back 10 years or so, that would have been an even bigger deal for you because you were the first woman to take part in an F1 race weekend. That will have amplified the pressure, even if it didn't in your own mind, certainly externally, because it isn't just any old new racing driver. It adds another element because of, unfortunately, where we are with sport and society. What was that like? Did it feel pressure? What were your nerves like going into all of that?
I definitely knew there was a lot riding on it. And like you said, it wasn't just about me. It felt like I was representing something more. And all the noise around my gender, the great thing for me was as soon as I got in the car, it all faded away, and I had a razor sharp focus. I knew exactly what I had to do on that day. I'd done so much work in the simulator. I knew it down to the last detail. And I knew I had 2 runs. I knew the first run was going to be the base run, and then I had to really get a lap time in the second run. But Maggots Beckett's in an F1 car, I mean, that's super fast, and you've got to just keep your foot down. But it was huge pressure, because at the same time, when you do an FP1, it's such a fine line between hero and zero. Like Kimi Antonelli knows, you want to show your speed, but you can't crash, and that's really tough. But for me, Silverstone, obviously I had the engine problem in one of the FP1s, but for me, then coming back in Hockenheim, obviously the first ever race I did for Mercedes-Benz in German touring cars, and managing to do a lap only 2/10 off Felipe Massa, same car, same day, that was the moment that I really felt that I'd shown what was possible.
Yeah, I've written that in my notes as well, Susie, because I was just like, wow, like that must have been, you must have just been so incredibly proud of yourself. And another thing that I've read, and I think this is in your book, is when you were 20 years old and you ended up on the podium alongside Lewis Hamilton. I think you were competing in the Formula Renault series, were you? And he helped you undo the champagne cork. Is that right?
Lewis was so used to winning by that point that he was popping champagne nearly every second weekend. I wasn't on the podium quite so much. So when I made it onto the podium at Snetterton, I couldn't get the champagne open. He had to take it from me and help me open it. And we often reminisce on those days. Obviously he went on to become one of the all-time greats, and I think quite clear because he was outstanding through karting and through the junior formulas. But we speak fondly of those days, and obviously look back and feel grateful for the journey that we had, that we managed to make it. And obviously funny that I ended up marrying Toto and he was obviously driving for Mercedes, that our lives are always intertwined.
It's a small world.
It's a good thing to get into this, because this reminds me of my early days working in a bar. I was terrified when anyone ordered anything other than a pint, because I could pull a pint, but the rest of it I struggled with. And when people ordered a champagne, the pressure to open it and not spill it in front of your boss next to you, knowing if you mess that up, you've wasted an expensive bottle of champagne, and the customer waiting. Just for anyone new to this, I found the key to be twist and pull down from the bottom.
Yes.
That's what is that? Would you agree there, Betty?
Yes, I agree. I think you've got to twist and pull at the same time.
Yeah, sure.
Susie, is this right?
Guys, I would love to tell you that I have a formula and that I've done it that many times. I now know what works. I don't think I've opened that much champagne in my life, so I'm going to trust you for that one.
Yeah, when you drink as much champagne as Betty does, most evenings, she does live the champagne lifestyle, Susie.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, you've got a bottle behind you, Betty.
Yeah, I know, that's quite embarrassing, isn't it?
The evidence is there, and we're recording this on a Wednesday lunchtime.
I've never opened that. That was a present for my 30th, right, guys? That's just decoration.
Right.
That's just decoration. I'm not an alcoholic. On this note, let's take a quick break because we've got adverts, but when we're back, we've got plenty more to discuss with Susie. Susie, there hasn't been a woman in Formula One since you, when you were the first woman in 22 years to take part in that F1 race weekend that we talked about earlier. Is that one of the reasons why you wanted to be part of F1 Academy?
Yes, but also for reasons much bigger. I don't see the sole purpose of F1 Academy is getting a woman to Formula One. I think if we increase the talent pool, if we create those role models, if we change the perception of the sport, it's a natural thing that will happen on the back of us having been successful with what we're trying to do with F1 Academy. But I don't hinge our success on just getting that woman to Formula One. I fundamentally believe a woman can do it. Obviously, I've shown physically it's possible, and from a speed and performance perspective, it's possible. But I think F1 Academy has a bigger role to play within the ecosystem. And like we touched upon, it's about disrupting. It's about showing that this sport has got representation of its new, bigger and more female fan base. And for us at F1 Academy, I'm incredibly lucky to get so much support from within F1, from the F1 teams, from the F1 management. And we're able to disrupt. We brought Charlotte Tilbury and we painted a car with hot lips. We managed to reach a whole new young audience, and that's what I think is also key, showing more young women that this sport has a place for them and breaking down those old preconceptions that it's a man's world and you need to be a tomboy as a girl to fit into racing, because you absolutely don't anymore.
Susie, why did you specifically want to do this with F1 Academy? There are so many things that racing drivers can do after motor racing. I mean, you could still be driving in other categories if you wanted to. We know you obviously had roles within Formula E. What was it about F1 Academy and the project that made you think this is where I want to go? Because so many people around F1 Academy speak about the personal role you have in it. We should make it really clear for our listeners. F1 Academy isn't something that Susie just puts her name to and that's about it. You work so hard on this project. Why is that? Why did you want to do that?
Well, at the time, we had just sold the Formula E team, my business partner and I was really at the point where I thought, well, it's time to do something outside of motorsport. I felt Formula One was Toto's domain. I didn't want to work for him for the sake of our marriage. Didn't want to work against him for the sake of our marriage. So it really left me looking at other options. And my business partner at the time was moving into the space industry and very much wanted me to run his new project. Oh. And I was quite, far advanced because I loved the technology. I loved the idea of learning something new. But I got a call from Stefano Domenicali regarding F1 Academy. And I really thought to myself, well, I never thought I would see this in my lifetime in racing, that the pinnacle of the sport is willing to invest, is willing to create something that can have a long and positive impact on the sport. So I kind of felt I would always regret it if I didn't get involved. And it had already been set up by the time I arrived. And I remember going to the very first race, and I'd never been at such an empty racetrack before. It was at Paul Ricard. It was literally the teams and the drivers and nobody else. And the minute I got out of my car, I was bombarded by the teams telling me they couldn't finance it. The drivers couldn't contribute their part of the budget. And I suddenly thought, oh, what have I got myself into here? So I called Stefano and said, listen, I think we have to change the whole structure of F1 Academy. It's not going to function like this. But I need time to figure out what it needs to look like and how we can build something that's going to be impactful long term. And then, of course, came the very ambitious ideas of getting the F1 teams on board, bringing all the assets in-house, commercialising them ourselves as F1 Academy, and racing alongside F1. And I had a lot of work initially. I mean, those were, if I look back now, tough months, because a lot of people told me, well, that's way too ambitious. You're never going to get the Formula One teams signing up. They've never given their name and livery to anything outside of the cars they build. But suddenly I started the project and got some teams on, and then the momentum built. I got huge support from Stefano and the race promotions team to put a calendar together, and then we got our Netflix series, and I remember walking onto the grid in Jeddah, and I had the Netflix crew following me. I saw all of the liveries for the first time, and we were racing 2 hours before Formula One, and it was really a pinch me moment that we'd managed to create something which just a few months before had seemed so desolate in a way, and now of course we're going from strength to strength.
I just want to pick up on, you were obviously told so many times that, you know, this isn't going to work, or the plans that you have aren't going to work in this sport. And obviously when you were younger and you were a racing driver, I imagine people said to you, Susie, what are you doing? You're a young female, like, you're not going to make it in motorsport. So there must be something about you that just goes, no, I know what I want and what I'm going to do. Where does that come from?
That's a really good question, Betty, and it's something I obviously explored as I wrote the book. And I do think, you know, grit and resilience is a muscle. The more you use it, the more strong it becomes. And I think the more challenges I came upon, the more times I picked myself up and chose to go back and try again. And that really built up my armor. It built up my resilience. And now I'm very comfortable in the uncomfortable. I'm fine when someone tells me, well, that's going to be, you know, nearly impossible. I think that's, you know, going to be really difficult. It ignites a little flame in me that says, okay, challenge accepted. Let's see if we can do it. And I think that definitely comes from the years of always having to, you know, pick myself back up and have that resilience and grit to keep going, because there was a lot of tough moments along the way.
I guess that little fight, that's exactly what we need in this sport to push women in motorsport forward, though, is somebody like you at the helm of it that has that fire inside that goes, no, I'm actually going to change things. And I guess one of the ways that you are doing that is by still keeping that femininity in the sport, i.e., you know, having a Charlotte Tilbury sponsor and having a car that had hot pink lips on it and all of that. And that got some criticism at the time, didn't it? Because people were saying, well, what are you trying to do here? But why do you think it's important to do that in women's sport and sort of say that message that, you know, if you want to wear makeup, you can wear makeup and still be good at sport. But if you don't, you don't have to. Why do you think that's important?
I mentioned it in my book, and I don't want to keep referencing the book, but it brought to life all the challenges that I went through, because of course you don't always look back on the history. Your journey is just your journey, and I'm someone that always looks forward. But I remember really struggling with figuring out how to manage my looks and my appearance in racing, because I wasn't your standard tomboy. I love Barbie, I love clothes, I love fashion. But I thought, okay, well, if I'm wearing a dress, then maybe it looks like I'm trying too hard, or they won't take me seriously. So should I dress more masculine? And it was a really tough balance. And it was only really when I came together with Toto and he said, the most important thing you can do is just be yourself. If you want to wear a dress, you wear a dress. And if you don't want to wear a dress but a trouser suit, you do that, but you be who you are. And in terms of bringing Charlotte Tilbury in the very first conversation, I knew she was going to be a partner that fitted so well, because she is about disrupting. Her whole mantra is dream it, dare it, do it. And I think with makeup, there's this preconception in women's sport that you shouldn't be wearing makeup because you need to be taken seriously. Well, you know what? Whether you wear makeup or not has zero impact on how you perform. If you have a face full of makeup under your helmet, it makes you no less of a driver than someone that's wearing no makeup. And I think that's what I wanted to really establish and show this next generation, that you can be both. You can love makeup and love racing. And that's why with those partnerships, and I'm incredibly lucky because those partnerships, you know, and also we have Pepsi joining with Gatorade, we have Tag Heuer, we have American Express. And when those brands joined Formula One, they all came and said, if we're in Formula One, we absolutely want to be in the Formula One Academy. For them, it was about helping us build something for the future. And that commitment in the end is what's going to give women's sport the momentum. And I'm very grateful for the partners that came on board that allowed us to build such a strong foundation.
I love that. I think that's so important. We talk about this stuff a lot on this podcast, Susie, as well as just doing the F1 stuff, because like I'm gay. And I've really struggled over the years with, I struggled accepting my sexuality when I was racing and when I was involved in sport. And I've had people talk to me about sort of feeling like they need to hide being LGBT to love motorsport. And I'm constantly sort of saying to people, look, you can watch F1 and then watch Drag Race after. Like, you can be anything, as I frequently do. And
there are a lot of similarities between the two.
So many similarities. F1's so camp. But anyway, you know, you can be anything you want to be and an F1 fan. And I just think that's so important. So thank you for sticking with that, Susie. Like, I think there's a lot of people who'll relate to that, not just in terms of women in sport, but whether it's different races or nationalities, or as I say, LGBT. I think that mantra is really important.
Yeah, I totally agree as well, because when I was younger, I was one of those girls that used to do every sport you could possibly imagine under the sun. But I also wasn't a tomboy, and I found it so difficult. So I resonate totally with what you're saying. And as a young girl, I would have been, if I was a young girl now and I was listening to you, I genuinely think I'd be beside myself. I would be like, oh my God, I've got a new leader that I can look up to. It's just incredible.
But tell me, Christian, because I'm interested, do you feel now that the sport and the environment is much easier for you being a gay man, or do you still feel that there's some prejudice out there?
It's a great question.
Good question.
If I'm honest, I struggle with the solitude of it working in Formula One sometimes. And I worry that as I'm trying to develop my career as a Formula One broadcaster, and when I'm in the Formula One paddock, I do still feel really alone. And I think when you feel really alone, you start to, especially when you've got a bit of a naturally anxious brain like I have, you sort of self-question it a little bit. I think it is... I see more efforts to improve situations for LGBT people and for women, for example, in motorsport than I do other sports I've worked in. So I do think it is getting better, but it's something I don't know if I say struggle with it, but I'm just sort of aware of the solidarity of it a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, and I still think we've got work to do. I think part of it is also what I find quite often. It's the older generations where they are still with different viewpoints, but I certainly can tell if I'm speaking to someone that has a daughter, because they have a different mindset. And I think slowly but surely we are getting there. But I think you're probably right, Christian. We've still got work to do, and we just need to keep being deliberate and to keep making sure that we're being inclusive, because there's certainly a lot of people that want to make that effort to make sure that the sport is inclusive, but it's not always as far as it should go. So we've still got to work on that.
Yeah, sure. And Susie, we're already running out of time. This is flying along, but I just wanted to do a final quick bit on F1 Academy. That I think I sometimes, especially people who are new to the sport, I sometimes have to find myself explaining that, and you've touched on this earlier, that the success of F1 Academy isn't F1 Academy driver wins championship and then the following season is in Formula One, or even is in the following season in Formula 3 or Formula 2. The success of the series is so much more than that, and it is thinking long term, isn't it? Because again, I speak to young Formula One fans. To them, girls racing is totally normal. It's the biggest advert and example of, look, girls race too. And I've already said, when I was racing, that just was not the case. I think, Susie, do you feel part of the success and the importance of the series is the impact it will have had in a decade's time, in a generation's time, in terms of the 7-8-year-olds who are looking at the telly now and saying, oh yeah, it's girls racing, that's normal?
100%. Abby Pooling, our champion from last year, she finished 4th on Sunday. She's had a podium in GB3, so we are seeing the progression and the success going up the ladder. But to your point, Christian, absolutely. And remembering that an 8-year-old can't drive herself to a kart track. So we need to make sure that the parents of the next generation realise that it is a possible career path, whether that's on track as a driver or off track. They need to see the possibilities within the sport, because they are the ones that have to encourage and help nurture the talent of their daughters. And so often it was parents that would simply not believe that motorsport was a place for their daughter. And I love now when I see little girls doing their birthday parties at go-kart tracks, because that's showing that now they feel, okay, well, this is an option for me. And that's something, it's going to take time, but I think in the short space that we've been up and running with F1 Academy, we've seen the impact that it can have, and it just gives me so much enthusiasm for what can come if we keep going over the years.
Yeah, and I also guess F1 Academy being on Netflix is only going to help with that as well, because parents can watch it with their children, and it helps that whole sort of dialogue and making people realise that their daughters can do it. Susie, we are going to take a very quick break, but when we come back, we've got lots of listener questions to put to you.
Welcome back to The Fast and the Curious, our special episode with Susie Wolff. Susie, we put it out into the world last week that you were coming on the podcast, and my goodness me, did our listeners respond to that. Can we do some fairly quick-fire questions here with you, Susie, because we've got so many to get through?
Let's go for it.
Right, love this. Okay, Sangi asks, what's next for F1 Academy?
Next for F1 Academy is some more big and punchy collaborations, which I'm super excited about. We'll be announcing one of them in Las Vegas. And then always making sure that we are continuing our ambitious vision, getting more young girls racing, supporting as many as we can, establishing a great calendar, and then helping our most talented move onwards and upwards, and ultimately making sure that next generation see that this sport has a place for them.
Lexi says, what would you say to a female fan that wants to get involved in an F1 Academy career or just a motorsport career generally as well?
Get on LinkedIn and get on the F1 websites, get on the F1 Academy websites, and be really vigorous in your approach. Which area do you want to get into? Who's doing what you're doing that you could connect with? Find your way in. It's competitive because so many people want to work in Formula One, but set yourself apart and show how and why you deserve the chance more than others, because there are opportunities out there. There's internships, there's possibilities, and you need to get yourself in the position that you can take those chances and opportunities.
Chris and Sarah have asked similar questions. I'm going to lump into one here. I hope you don't mind, Chris or Sarah. So Chris asks, why is it taking so long to see a woman in F1 when we see them winning in other categories? And Sarah asks, what's the likely timeline for a female driver in F1? Susie, I'm fully aware this is a complex question and a complex answer, but we got so many of this nature. I think we mentioned before we started recording, Susie, this is something that particularly interests our audience, I think.
Well, I think in the end, it's going to happen because the more young women that race, the most talented will rise through. But you need to take the right career trajectory, which is through the junior formulas. And obviously, there's only 20 spots on that F1 grid. There would be so many young boys and men that would be also worthy of a chance. But it will come down to a girl being good enough to rise through the ranks and deserve her place on merit and performance. And I have no doubt that will happen because these young girls that are now racing in karting, they're winning races at European and World Championship level. But I always hesitate to put a timeline on it because if I say 5 to 10 years, it makes me feel bad that those that are racing now think, well, she obviously doesn't think I can do it because that means I'm out of her timeline. But I do think it's something that will naturally happen the more talent we get, female talent that we get competing in the sport.
Laura says, and I like this question because I was thinking the same thing, Laura, will F1 Academy be at Silverstone?
Well, we haven't released our calendar yet, but let's just say I love Silverstone and I would love to get F1 Academy to Silverstone. Watch this space.
Ooh. I like that for a tease. Lovely. Nat's question. No, I've read through this, but I've missed Nat's question. Nat's question is, what's your hair routine? It's as good a question as any, I suppose, Nat.
It's a good question.
My hair routine?
Your hair routine. You've got some hair envy from Nat here.
Shiny. It's always very shiny and sleek.
Yeah, I'm really lucky that it's straight hair anyway. So I don't need to do a lot in the mornings, which is great because I'm definitely not someone that has the patience to spend a long time on my appearance in the morning. But I'm also lucky that we have Wella as a partner now. So I get a constant flow of great products. I have some great tips from them, how to manage my hair better. But I think I'm just lucky on the hair because I definitely don't have a special routine and I'm definitely not someone that has the patience to spend a lot of time on it.
Good answer. Finally, this is also an interesting question.
This is the best question, Dave. This is the best question by far. I love this question.
So this is from Dave. He says, do you and Toto talk about normal things like buying toilet roll?
Dave, of course we talk about normal things. We're a normal married couple. No, we're really lucky that of course we share the same interests and of course we'll talk about racing, but we also have a completely normal family life, which means we have to talk about the boring everyday stuff as well. So definitely, I don't think we've ever talked about toilet paper,
Mm.
but we definitely would be much more normal than you can probably imagine.
You forget, like, I'm always fascinated with this with F1 drivers, like doing their shopping and things like that. But most of them have something to do them for you. Betty, we talked to Alex Albon about operating the washing machine, didn't we?
Yeah, he said he didn't know how to turn it on. He didn't know how to put a clothes wash on.
Well, I'm also not the most domesticated. I'm a terrible cook, but I do like everything really tidy. So I'm very good at organizing. Toto tells me that my first job is actually logistics manager for the family. And my second job is F1 Academy. But yeah, around the house, I wouldn't be the most talented.
Right, Susie, want to talk to you about Formula One in just a second, but first, we've mentioned the book. Talk to us a little bit about the book. What can people expect from it? Why write a book? I'm interested to know more about what you wanted the book to be.
Well, the original idea was to do a children's book because I really wanted to, tell the story to the next generation of it being possible for a little girl to be a racing driver. But when I spoke to quite a few publishers, they all said, well, the first thing you have to do is write your own book. And at the time, I thought, well, I don't have the time, that's a huge task. But I was at home in Scotland for some Netflix filming, and I sat down with my brother and was, just updating him. And I said, yeah, and this idea of the book. And he said, oh, that's super interesting. And he's the creative one in the family. He's a film director. And he kind of talked about what structure it would take and how it could look. And I suddenly thought, I will write the book and I'll write it together with you. And it was something that I could never have done without him, without a doubt, because he forced me to go to difficult places. He helped me make it a book that wasn't just about motorsport, but was about a young woman finding her way, becoming a wife, a mother, trying to hang on to her own identity at the same time as managing all the other things in her life. And I really hope that it's an enjoyable read. It's definitely not just the polished version of my story. It goes through the tough moments that I went through, and I hope, even if you're not into racing, that there's certain parts of it that you'll resonate with.
What date is it out, Susie?
Well, I'm on the book tour this week, and it comes out on Thursday, October the 23rd.
Ooh,
I think for
exciting.
the vast majority of people listening to this, that will mean it's out now, unless you're right on the feed pressing play when it's out. So there you go. We're in all good bookshops, everybody. Susie, we are in theory, it sometimes veers off into other topics, as you've discovered, but in theory, we're a Formula One podcast. And you have an active interest in that sport, don't you? We should talk about the Formula One a little bit. I mean, this year seems to have been the year dominated by the McLaren battle. What have you made between that battle between the two and the season in general, really?
Well, I always love to watch exciting racing. I think for me that's first and foremost, and it's been great to see the inter-battle that you have at McLaren, because I think probably Lando didn't expect to have Oscar being quite so fast at places, and now obviously in a position where, through to his kind of non-finishes, in a position where he's at the front. But I wouldn't write off Max. I think to be the one chasing puts you in an easier position because you can take more risk. You're not worrying about what could go wrong. You're just simply chasing and hunting. And Max knows how to win a championship. And that's definitely a strength that the other two don't have yet. And his car looks to be quick enough. So tough for McLaren, because not only do they have to manage the inter-battle, they also have to be very aware of someone coming along and ruining the party. But it's been some exciting racing recently, so I'm really looking forward to seeing if it's going to come down to a showdown in Abu Dhabi.
Oh, can you imagine? And also, we say this every time we record an episode. If someone's going to do it, it is going to be Max Verstappen. Like, he is so good, isn't he? Do you have a title prediction for us, Susie? If we're to put you on the spot, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I hope that Lando or Oscar does do it, because I think it would be nice to have a McLaren driver as world champion. Obviously, they've won the constructors twice, and I think both are deserving. I respect a lot that Lando is quite open about the struggles he has, and he kind of says, yes, I'm not Max, but that doesn't mean I can't also win a world title, and I respect that. I
Yeah.
think sometimes it's good to be able to say, well, I am different, but I'm doing it my way. But I just think Max and the speed he has and the ability to get every last tenth of a second, millisecond out of that car means that he will be a real threat. So if you're going to pin me down, I think I might put my money on Max, to be honest.
Really? Wow. Yeah. I mean, he's really good, isn't he? He's a ludicrously good Formula One driver. It's absolutely insane. Just a couple of bits before we go. A bit of any other business, if that's all right, Susie. We mentioned this right at the very start. Me and Betty are both recently engaged.
Not to each other.
No, not to each other. For reasons we've discussed, Susie, that wouldn't work. But yeah, to separate people. And both marrying Scotsmen as well, as we've said, Betty, which is fantastic. We didn't realise before this, did we? We've never put that together. Given you mentioned that you didn't work in Formula One, possibly to save the marriage, or both with Toto or against him, but given you are this power couple, do you have any relationship advice for us as we enter or are about to enter marriage?
Well, such an exciting time for you both, and I think you're making a very good choice marrying Scott's person.
Thank you.
I think my main advice would be around communication. Don't ever let the communication break down. If something's worrying you or on your mind, it's much better to have it said and to talk about it. Toto and I have a golden rule that we don't go to bed angry with each other.
Yeah.
And then the second small bit, which is related to that, don't get caught up on the small stuff. In the end, it's the small stuff which can sometimes turn into big stuff. But if you look at it within the bigger picture, it's always not that important. So don't allow yourself to argue and get caught up on the small stuff. And then lastly, yeah, you need to be each other's biggest champions. People sometimes say, oh, would you be where you are without Toto? Absolutely not. You know, I love all the support that he's given me. He pushes me. He's tough sometimes. But he's been my biggest critic, but also my biggest supporter at times. And I think it's being each other's biggest champion, also not just in the good moments, but also the really tough moments.
That's great advice. I need a pen. I need to write this down.
It's all right. We're recording it, Betty. Don't worry.
Yeah, true. I'll listen to it. I'll go and play it to Alex later. Look, mate, listen to this.
Because that's not passive aggressive, is it? Listen to this.
Listen to this. If you want our marriage to work. Susie, on Toto, when we had him on the podcast, he told us that he had a very specific breakfast.
I've got no memory of this.
We want to check whether this is still what happens. So he said that he has ham, eggs, bacon, 2 slices of really toasted pumpernickel bread, tomato and salt, which is very specific. Is it the same, or has he broken this habit?
He sometimes breaks the habit because he's going through a bulking phase, so he needs lots of protein. So he'll have more scrambled eggs, cottage cheese, and on days where he's running late, he only has time for a coffee, so he doesn't actually have time for his elaborate breakfast. I think that breakfast is more of a race weekend breakfast because he likes to stick to the same routine on a race weekend and always eat the same thing. But at home, he doesn't have that every day.
And speaking of when Toto was on the pod, Susie, our third host who sort of drops in and out of the podcast is a man called Greg James. Our listeners know him. I think you'll probably know who he is. Greg is lovely, but Greg is an idiot. There's no question about that. And Greg got in his head when we had Toto on. Bear in mind, the podcast was brand new as well, and we're like trying to make it into Formula One. And Greg had this idea, and I was like, supposedly the F1 person on the podcast. I was like, you can't do this, Greg. He was like, no, it'd be great. It'd be great. We'll do it. And he wanted to ask Toto the question, which I'll ask you now. What's the time, Toto Wolff? Now, Susie, I'm guessing you get this. You're British and get the sort of what nursery rhyme thing it's from. This is what happened when we asked it Toto.
When we were brainstorming ideas for the podcast,
oh, God.
one of the features we came up with was going to be called What's the Time, Toto Wolff? Do you like that as a feature name?
Do you get what he means?
No.
Right, okay.
Okay, well, can I just ask the question then? What's the time, Toto Wolff?
It's 4, I think.
Thank you.
Toto looked quite baffled. Susie, are you aware of this thing? Yeah... I suppose, yeah, are you aware of this limerick or whatever it is? Does it come up?
I'm trying to remember from my childhood, but nothing pops to mind. Am I missing something really obvious here?
It's like a game.
Yeah, it's What's the Time, Mr. Wolf? It's not a nursery rhyme or a lyric. Betty's right. It's a game, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's the time, Mr. Wolf?
So we put it to Toto. Well, Greg did, not us. And
God, not
Toto
us.
thought Greg was mental. And so now we're going to ask you, Susie, what's the time, Susie Wolff?
Susie Wolff.
And do I actually give you the time, or what do I say now?
Oh,
Completely
do
up
you
to
like,
you,
Susie?
Susie.
I've got no idea. We've lost it.
We've lost it.
Yeah.
Oh God.
It wasn't a good idea bringing it up the first time. It wasn't the second. But
No.
yeah, it's a childhood game. You have to do the steps, don't you? What's the time, Mr. Wolf? And then you say
Yeah.
it's 3:00, and you have to try and get, like, for example, 3:00, 3 steps closer. I can't fully remember how it works, but it's like a nursery rhyme game. And the fact that you don't know it, Susie, is maybe me. Is it an English thing, as a British thing, particularly, Betty?
Maybe. Don't know. Maybe they don't play it in Scotland.
Anyway, sorry, Susie.
From your guys' childhood, I'm not sure that went national.
No. No, I think this was going so well, and we've just embarrassed ourselves. It's just that Greg said we shouldn't bring this up.
always
At the
No,
time.
you haven't. Don't worry.
That's good. That's good. Susie, honestly, this has been an utter joy. We've been doing this podcast 3 years, and this has been one of my favourite ever recording sessions. This has been
By a
an
long
utter
shot.
joy. By a long shot. Susie, thanks for being brilliant. I think
thank
there are
you
so
so
many
much.
people listening to this podcast who will so relate to the chat we've had and to what you're doing in Formula One. So, and the wider world of motorsport. So, Susie, thank you so much for coming on The Fast and the Curious.
Thank you both so much. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Susie.
And the book is called Driven and is available, depending on when you'll listen to this, now or nearly now in all good bookstores.
Nearly now.
Hope you enjoy it.
Thank you so much, Susie. If you've enjoyed this podcast, everybody, then please subscribe both to our audio feed and also wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. Subscribe there. We're going to be back tomorrow with a preview of the Mexican Grand Prix. Greg's going to be on that, probably embarrassing us further. F1 TV commentator Alex Jakes is also going to be with us, and Christian will be speaking to Esteban Ocon. It's not too late to send your questions in. Fast Curious Pod on the socials. Thank you very much to Susie for joining us. What a wonderful interview, and we will speak to you soon. Goodbye.